Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Gonzalez. How's it going, Adrian?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right. Wrapping up my program in a week and hopefully getting a job after that and going out and being a productive member of society once again.
But yay!
Yeah.
Congrats, dude.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. Got one last project to get through, and then it's clear sailing from there on out. Real excited. So let's take care of the upkeep, and we can get into our discussion for today. First off, I want to tell you that we are brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is a wonderful website. They have all sorts of tokens, dice bags, playmats, and art prints featuring magic art and art from the rest of the world as a whole. And they do some genuinely really cool stuff. They recently had a charity playmat on there of Mark Rosewater's illustrated card, Look at Me, I'm the DCI. But there's been all sorts of really, really cool stuff that they have put out through the years, and they have an affiliate program, and we're part of it. So we're going to let you know that if you want to get some tokens, get some playmats, get some dice bags, whatever it is that they sell, and you want to improve the aesthetic quality of your play space, you can get it at 5% off. We have a affiliate code with them. It's Commontary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast. Again, that is Commontary, all caps, spelled in the as it is in the name of the podcast, and you will get 5% off your order. They give us a little bit of a kickback, so you're helping keep the lights on here, and you're also helping yourself get a little bit of money off your order. Adrian, what do you got for us?
Well, as you all may well know, we are on Patreon. For just $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including our pre- and post shows, and you get access to our Patreon-exclusive Discord channel. We're currently in the middle of our Patreon drive. We're looking to get up to $100 an episode. We're currently sitting at 93. Once we hit that sweet 100 mark, Mike and I will be financially obligated to produce set reviews with visual representation, and we will be giving away a playmat to not all of our patrons. We'll be drawing for a playmat with all of our patrons. Wow, that was almost a huge misstep there. The other thing that we have going on right now is the MTG Pauper Discord is currently doing a Brewers Challenge. Let me pull up the rules. You have to main deck, have 4 copies of Tortured Existence, and a minimum of 4 copies with Dredge in the rules text. And you have to reach the top 8 of a Magic Online Weekend Pauper Challenge. So there are prizes on that. Mike, why don't we go ahead and stick the invite link for the Discord in the show today, and that way people can go and check it out if they're interested in playing in this challenge.
Definitely, it's a nice little community thing. Just a little extra added challenge for the challenge.
Right, exactly.
All right, so today, we're recording this on a Friday, we actually just got a full spoiler for the upcoming two-headed giant-based set, Battlebond. And Battlebond has this... What do you think of the actual aesthetic of this set?
So I actually like it a lot. I want to tell you, it reminds me of... Obviously, WWE is the immediate comparison, but I was actually not really a wrestling fan, so it reminds me of like Rocket League and Street Fighter.
Yeah, it's got like a definite hint of like goofball video game going on.
Yeah.
The actual plane itself is kind of in the vein of Fiora and Ravnica, very sort of.
It's like Warworld from DC.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of like tropes involved in it, but it's basically a Renaissance era sort of level of technological advancement, and in this world there's a big old stadium and there are 2v2 gladiatorial combat matches, and there's a bunch of mechanics that they've built around that, and unfortunately what that means is a lot of these cards just aren't good in 1v1, weirdly enough, because historically, thinking through, like, Conspiracy has been really, really good to us as a format. We've got Monarch, we've got Custody Squire, which is now seeing a little bit of play in Fringe decks. They've generally been pretty solid for the format, so this one, a little bit of a letdown, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would definitely say. And we're going to very briefly cover the cards that we liked. Fine, good. And then we're going to do a set review of a totally different set.
Yeah, we'll get into that more, but there's only really two cards that we wanted to touch upon that we sort of agree.
And they're downshifts. They're not even new cards.
Well, there is one non-downshift. Are we talking all three here? Because
I thought you said two. My bad. You said three.
Okay, so we've got Stadium Vendors as the one new card that we think has some potential in our format. And Stadium Vendors is 3 and a red for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, choose a player. That player adds 2 mana of any one color they choose. So
Familiars comes to mind, but obviously the big problem with this card is it's not reduced by any of the good familiars. Actually, I think it's reduced by the black one, right? Doesn't Nightscape reduce red spells?
yeah, all the familiars reduce the 2 allied colors. So if there's some sort of Grixis version of this list, it could definitely play this instead of Prosperous Pirates for the sheer fact that it comes down a turn earlier.
Yeah, and also it gets double reduction, doesn't it? No, it's only a red spell. Never mind, I'm crazy. And then what are the two downshifts that you were speaking about?
All right, so we had talked briefly about this. Peace Strider and Pierce Strider both got downshifted. They're both 4 mana 3/3s, artifact creatures, constructs the pair of them. And Peace Strider, when it enters the battlefield, you gain 3, and when Pierce Strider enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 3 life. So
our thinking was, again, maybe you could abuse it in a flicker type strategy that appears, obviously Ghostly Flicker is busted. All 3 cards we talked about are all like, hey, maybe this would be good with Ghostly Flicker, which is something you have to consider with every kind of ETB effect, I feel like, in Pauper. What I like about them is that they're colorless. I think Pierce Strider is obviously a little bit better, but I don't even know if it's really that good. It was just an interesting thought because it's a colorless card, so it could go very easily into like Tron or something.
yeah, it does represent a certain amount of like offensive power, but by and large, I feel like this set was mostly a miss. There's a lot of like interesting cards that will be fun to play with in this limited format, but might not exactly be great fits for constructed formats, and I think that's fine. Like, not every set is built with our format in mind, and there's also like one of the key mechanics from this set is assist, which is another player can help pay for the generic mana in a card's cost. And that's really cool in a set where, like, if you and your teammate in a 2-headed giant match, if one of you doesn't have a play on one turn, you can kind of like pool your mana, literally, and cast out like a 6-drop on turn 3. Now, most of these cards as a result are a little bit overcosted, and none of them are impactful enough where even in Tron they'd be enjoyable. So it just kind of doesn't line up well with what most decks are trying to do in Pauper. So bit of a miss for us, but it does actually look like a blast to draft.
Yes.
I don't know if you're planning to actually try to draft this thing, but I definitely am.
I think you're supposed to be playing it as sealed. I don't know if you're supposed to actually draft it.
I thought the whole point of it was that you drafted and it was like this weird draft where like the teams sat next to one another.
The pre-release stuff is definitely sealed, and each team gets 6 packs.
Ooh, that seems very slim.
Yeah, it's weird. I will probably not really a limited player. We might do something at work. So maybe in that instance, I could do something.
It seems like a really fun set, and I'll definitely at least give it a shot. So there's also a ton of really awesome reprints for other formats, but it just didn't strike the mark with us. So instead, it's the day of a spoiler release. We're gonna actually go back in time a little bit. We're gonna do a set review of notable cards out of Rise of the Eldrazi.
Yes, and Mike, you actually are the one who selected this. This is a patron topic. Thank you, Thurban Valiant. But Mike, you actually selected this set, and why don't you tell our listeners why Rise of the Eldrazi in particular?
So a while back, I did a quick thing just for my own self-interest where I ran through most of the Magic sets as a whole and tried to determine which ones gave the most to Pauper. And Rise of the Eldrazi is surprisingly relevant to this day. There's a bunch of cards that were introduced in this set, which I still think are super, super relevant to the format. And the moment I heard this idea, I was immediately in my head, even though I didn't say it at the time, I was like, we got to do Rise. We've got to do Rise. Rise is a very, very powerful set in terms of what it was doing. It was heralded as a fan favorite in terms of its limited format, and it brought a bunch of really powerful mechanics with it. So we're going to kind of hit some of the high points, and I think we could also hit some of the things that we either wish were better, or have always kind of been on the fringe of things. But let's start things off strong here. We've got one of the mechanics that was introduced in this set, Totem Armor, on Hyena Umbra. So Hyena Umbra is 1 white for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and its first strike, and it has Totem Armor. If enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. So,
are you only doing the notables, Mike? Sorry.
I think we'll do the notables for the first pass, and if there's anything else that we want to discuss.
Okay, gotcha. Because I didn't know. Sorry, my mistake. I definitely have something I want to talk about at the end. But yes, Hyena Umbra, very, very good card. Played in mono white strategies, played in Boggles. I'm thinking specifically of Heroic. I think I saw Deluxe running it in his mono white infect deck. Just generally a strong card in mono white. The first strike is always relevant, and then the Totem Armor, I think, is really what seals the deal.
Yeah, and Totem Armor is one of those weird ones where it protects you against certain removal very well, and against other removal it's just very ineffective, because this doesn't protect against Edict effects, and it also does not protect against -X/-X effects, because it does just remove all the damage. It doesn't reset the power and toughness, so if something's a 0/0, it's still going to be a 0/0 after this Totem Armor trigger goes off.
Well, I don't even think the trigger actually happens. When a creature gets -/- and dies, it actually doesn't get destroyed. It ceases to exist as a state-based effect. So right. I think that might be the interaction why that doesn't work too.
Well, point being, this is a staple in Boggles decks and has been pretty much as long as this card's been around, and I don't see this going anywhere anytime soon. It's just really, really solid for the mana cost.
Yeah.
Next up, Lone Missionary. How about you tell us a little bit about this card?
Yeah, sure. 1 and a white gets you a 2/1, whatever. When a Lone Missionary enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. So that's really the strength of this card. It's played in, I think the most places I've seen is like Monarch type strategies where they can continuously rebuy the Lone Missionary. It's great against burn, great against red decks just in general. It's great, the 2 power makes it a great defensive creature against decks like Red Deck Wins or Stompy. And then the 4 life normally can just push you just out of reach. That's 1.5. Well, 1 1/3 of a burn spell for the red deck. Yeah. So it's a strong effect stapled onto a good body at a low cost.
Yeah, it's one of those things where life gain effects are in general not great when they're just life gain, but if you staple them onto a body or have an additional effect, a la something like Pulse of Marasa, where it's just enough for it to matter, and also just in terms of the amount of life here, like 4 life, as you mentioned, is more than 1 burn spell.
I don't think I'm going too much on a limb here when I say this is basically Pauper Snapcaster Mage.
That is, sir. I think at this point you've fully reached the point of absurdity. I think that's one not even I can get behind.
No,
it is a 2/1 for 2.
That's a joke for the fans. No, I don't really think so. It's a 2/1 for 2 that does something when it enters the battlefield, and there the similarities end. It's not even a human.
Yeah.
Or a wizard.
Next up, we've got Soul's Attendant, which is 1 white for 1/1. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you may gain 1 life. This is
the other sister in Soul Sisters.
Yeah, and I've got to admit, that's a deck that does not see the play that it used to. It used to be that you'd see white token strategies from time to time, and
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, what were you gonna say?
I've seen Souls. Yeah, the white token strategy certainly. Triplicate Spirits, Raise the Alarm, etc., etc. But Soul's Attendant and the other one, the first one, Soul Warden are both in Rallygond.
Oh, that's true, because it does help you kind of stave off the more aggressive matchups just by...
Yeah, and the infinite life gain, and so you can set it for the infinite tokens. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, this is just a solid performer. It's seen probably more play in other formats, namely Modern, where Soul Sisters is a thing.
And actually, very, very annoying.
Yeah, turns out gaining a bunch of life in a format that wants to go fast doesn't always let the other player do what they want. But yeah, Soul's Attendant, solid inclusion. Definitely something that I have played in the past and will probably play again in the future. How about you let us know about Deprive, Adrian?
Sure. Deprive is basically counterspell. Bit of a downside. Blue gets you an instant as an additional cost to cast Deprive. Return a land you control to its owner's hand. Counter target spell. And I will say this is generally counterspell 5 and 6 for blue decks that want it, or mostly just 5, maybe 6.
Yeah, it's generally when you've maxed out on counterspells and don't have a good way to fuel Logic Knot is how I generally view this. Like if I'm really hurting for another 2 mana counter anything, if I've got any sort of like self-mill thing going on, I'm definitely reaching for Logic Knots over this, but in the average deck, this is just really solid, especially if you have utility lands to back it up. Like the blue-black angler lists could occasionally run Bajuka Bogs, so you could use this to rebuy them if necessary. I don't know. I like Deprive. It is definitely a utility card, but it is one of the only recent 2 mana counter anything counter spells.
And also the art on it is beautiful.
Yeah, I've always liked this. What is that, an elf?
I think it's an elf, and it looks like a paint balloon just exploded on them, and they look shocked. It's great.
All right. So yeah, Deprive, play it if you need that extra counter spell. That's exactly what this card does, and it excels at it. Next up, we've got Distortion Strike, which I don't think sees that much play anymore.
Yeah, it was really like a blue-green infect card. For those at home, it's you for sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn and is unblockable, and it has a rebound. So it's a way of getting in your infect creature twice.
I mean, this has this ever? I can't remember seeing this ever in Kiln Fiend decks, but this feels like something that would go there as well.
I think in the Kiln Fiend deck, you're generally trying to kill on the same turn, and the ones that they play, like Shadow Rift, actually draw you a card so that you can hopefully then cast another spell on the same turn. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's the reason this card doesn't see play as much in that deck.
I guess that's pretty fair, yeah.
Whereas the +1 and the unblockable and the rebound, I think might be a little bit more relevant. And in fact, I don't know. Maybe I'm just making stuff up because, yeah.
All right. Let's move on to a card that is deeply, deeply relevant to this format and has been for years now. Mnemonic Wall. 4 and a blue for an 0/4 defender. When it enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. This is pretty much at this point an auto-include in Tron decks.
Yeah, as you all know, in fact, we talked about it even earlier on the show. It's the other half, one of the other halves of the Flicker combo. You can keep rebuying Ghostly Flicker to your hand. It was a big player in the Drake deck, and I think ever since then, people have sort of realized what a powerful effect this is. And so, yeah, people play it in Tron alongside Ghostly Flicker, or really just for value. It's just a strong card in general in the big mana decks.
Yeah, and the fact that it leaves the 0/4 body, even if you're not getting up to Flicker shenanigans, it does provide a pretty solid blocker for dorky attackers. Where do you fall on this versus Archaeomancer?
I think Archaeomancer was better, and specifically Drake, because it was able to come down earlier, but I like Mnemonic Wall better overall. And I will go ahead and say the Theros Mnemonic Wall is my favorite Mnemonic Wall.
Ooh, we're gonna have to diverge on that one, buddy. I love the original art of this. I don't know what the hell it's supposed to be besides a wall, but I've always really liked it.
It looks like a waterfall or an air. I'm not sure. I like the Theros one.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Opinions are just that, opinions.
One stroke for all folks, Mike.
That's not at all how the saying goes. How about you tell me a little bit about Narcolepsy?
Yeah, Narcolepsy is a sideboard card that doesn't really see a lot of play anymore. I don't even think in Mono Blue Delver, which is where people used to play it. It's 1 of the blue, enchant creature. At the beginning of each upkeep, if enchanted creature's untapped, tap it. And it was a form of removal for that deck, which, lacks hard removal. I think Vapor Snag is way more on vogue these days.
And also, for what it's worth, Curse of Change does exist, which is the same card as this, except its mana cost is 1 and a hybrid Azorius.
Well,
So,
I think it also goes ahead and taps it.
does it actually? I thought it was still the beginning of upkeep tap it. But
Let's look it up.
The other notable thing about Curse of Chains is, since it does occasionally matter, Curse of Chains can enchant a...
No, it's the exact same.
It is the exact same.
Guardian of the Guild Pact. Yeah.
It enchants Guardian of the Guild Pact. It also, I don't know, potentially, like, I guess against mono white heroic, like, you could get them into a situation where you can pop this on something and then they have to... Oh, no, they can still give it pro blue. Never mind. The niche case here is Guardian of the Guild Pact can get tapped down by that, whereas Narcolepsy cannot even be cast targeting it. But yeah, this is sideboard tech of Days Gone By. Next up, another card that is still fairly relevant, although he's being pushed out a little bit by the new hotness. Seagate Oracle, 2 and a blue for a 1/3. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 2 cards of your library. One goes to your hand, the other goes to the bottom of your library. So it has a sleight of hand on ETB.
Mike and I dumbly thought that Augur of Bolas would never replace this card because this one can get you a land.
Yeah,
and I think in some decks that does matter, but Augur of Bolas is, obviously the more played card.
Yeah, I think Augur fit well into Delver strategies because they were already playing a high density of instants and sorceries, and as a result, it basically almost always hit, and that's a deck that doesn't need to hit that many lands to begin with, and they weren't even playing Seagate Oracle to begin with. They literally just got in when Augur was printed on having this like 1/3 dork on the ground. And I still like Seagate Oracle for what it's worth. It's just the fact that digging 3 cards, being able to hit something that is relevant, it's just very good. That extra card is a lot more important than I think we realized at the time. So Seagate Oracle, I will still play you occasionally in Tron, but sorry, buddy. Your days of being the number 1/3 in blue, I think, are past at this point.
Up next, we've got Bloodthrone Vampire. 1 and a black gets you a 1/1. Sack a creature. Bloodthrone Vampire gets +2/+2 till end of turn. So it's a smaller Nantuko Husk, but it costs less. And so sometimes you might see it in sacrifice strategies in between Husk and its mini reprints and Carrion Feeder.
All right, I've got to ask you, what is in your mind the best of the 3 options for Nantuko Husk reprints? Is it the Husk, is it Vampire Aristocrat, or is it Phyrexian Ghoul? It's the Husk. Yeah, I love that creepy little bug guy, but
yeah, I like Spooky Bug Man.
Yeah, so Bloodthrone Vampire is nice because it represents a smaller initial cost. It does have the downside of dying to slightly more removal, but most of the time, the stuff that would kill Husk, if it's targeted removal, is just as likely to kill Bloodthrone Vampire. It does have the disadvantage of it would have to eat 2 things in order to survive a lightning bolt versus the 1 that a Husk would have to eat. But it does represent a much cheaper play, which means you can have, like the potential for a better curve out in like a black-green Aristocrat style deck where you're going Blister Pod into this, into some sort of 3-drop that matters. So you can kind of... I think it's very curve dependent as to whether or not you want this or one of the 3-drop 2/2 versions of it. And I don't think either of them is necessarily wrong. It just matters as to what the rest of your curve is looking like. Sure. I don't know. I like it. I dig the art. Next up, we've got Shrivel. Shrivel is actually technically kind of a reprint. Shrivel is 1 and a black for a sorcery. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. This is just nausea, but I guess with the printing of Rise of the Eldrazi, people could run a full 8 of them if they really wanted to. This card's still good. I personally think the art on Shrivel is better than all the arts for Nausea, but...
No, that's not true. What about Stinky Toots? Stinky Fairy Toots?
It's not good art. It's old art.
You're right, it's great art. Mike's wrong.
All right.
Also,
all right.
seventh edition foil nausea.
No, don't do this to me. We're moving on. Next up is Flame Slash. Flame Slash is a red for a sorcery. It deals 4 damage to target creature. This has seen a good chunk of play in the Morosatron list. I am waiting for the day where we get an instant speed version of this.
Scred.
I mean, Scred exists. It does have a deck building constraint. I would just love,
I mean,
like,
barely, but yeah.
I mean, so the decks that are playing Flame Slash just straight up do not have the option of playing Scred. Like, how is a Tron deck ever going to hit more than a handful of snow-covered basics?
Okay, you're right. No,
I'm just saying. Like,
No, you're right.
I think it would be nice at some point when Wizards decides it's okay to get a 1-mana instant speed 4 damage target creature. Because it's still...
Galvanic Blast. No, I'm kidding. I'm with you.
Gal Blast isn't the worst argument against it, but I don't know. I just love to see this effect at instant, but this is still a really powerful effect. 4 damage kills pretty much everything except Gurmag Angler, Gearseeker Serpent, Atog if they have sackable artifacts, and anything in hexproof. It's apart from that though, it really does just eat most smaller threats in the format.
It's a strong card.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us about this this lovely hat wearing little thing here, Goblin Arsonist.
All right. Next up, we got Goblin Arsonist. R gets you a 1/1. When Goblin Arsonist is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may have it deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Sometimes played in Goblins, you can sacrifice it to Sledder or the other one whose name I'm forgetting right now.
Mog Raider.
Yeah, Mog Raider. Get an extra point of damage in, and then pump them for the turn.
Yeah.
I don't think Goblins is really playing this card that much, though, anymore.
No, it also doesn't help that Goblins has kind of been pushed out to be a bit of a fringe deck at this point within the format. It shows up from time to time, but it's not putting up any really amazing results. That said, this does let you get a little tricky where, if your opponent blocks somewhere, you can potentially at least make your thing trade by pumping something and, pinging a thing. It does the exact thing that Goblins wants to do, where it provides value with the sack outlets and also helps deal with pesky threats. So I like it. It's just the deck it goes into has not been stellar for the past little while. All right, let's move on to redder pastures. I'm going to hit you with Kiln Fiend. 1 in a red, a 1/2. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +3/+0 until end of turn. This is the mega prowess, the original prowess.
This is a whole. This card goes and defines an archetype.
Yeah, it's. I think this is one of the most powerful cards out of the set in terms of sheer velocity. This thing gets out of hand very quickly. It automatically turns on the Ferocious on Temur Battle Rage just by casting it and targeting this thing. I've won a decent chunk of games with Kiln Fiend, and I adore this card. It's such a tiny little design, and this thing just wrecks people so quickly. Now, we've seen prowess in the time since the printing of this come into the main... It's an evergreen mechanic now. Prowess shows up in pretty much every set, and it's become one of Blue's big mechanics. So... I guess, do you think we're ever going to see at Common another thing like Kiln Fiend that really is much more aggressive and less of kind of a side like tempo thing where, I can get +1/+1 by playing my combat tricks?
I think you're more likely to get a +2/+0 instead of a +3/+0 these days.
You just think that this is a little bit too powerful for these days?
I think 3's a little high these days.
All right, that's fair enough. I mean, how many years ago was Dragon's Maze at this point? Probably more than I want to think about.
Yeah, don't think about it. Up next, we've got... Sorry, I'm looking through here to make sure I didn't miss one. I'm going to go with Stagger Shock. Stagger Shock is 2 in a red. It deals 2 damage to target creature or player and it is rebound at instant speed. Not really a highly played card in the format, but definitely a fun little... I guess a utility card if you're playing a deck that wants this. but not really on vogue in the format right at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, so Stagger Shock has had its role in controlling decks where you want 2 shocks for the price of, I guess, 3, but the fact that this thing is instant speed and you can kind of, if your opponent plays out two toughness creatures and you have the mana up, you can shock 1 at end of turn and then shock 1 on your upkeep. And I think sort of the built-in 2-for-1 and the fact that if you kill their only thing, you can still point the other half at their face, I think really makes this a pretty powerful card. It's never amazing, but it's always solid, and it feels nice to get the 2-for-1, right?
Right.
I just haven't seen this played in long enough where I'm not sure if it still technically has a home, but I've got fond memories of it, and I love it in low power cubes. I actually think this is an absolutely stupid card in pauper cubes. All right, let's move on to green. So Ancient Stirrings. Let's talk about this thing. This thing is good enough in Modern that I've seen people on Twitter ranting about it, how it should be banned every time Lantern Control wins a GP or something.
Or Tron,
yeah. So Ancient Stirrings is a green for a sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may then reveal a colorless card from among them, put it into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So tell me where this has seen play in Pauper.
Mostly, I feel like mostly mono green Tron, or just Tron in general still. Use it to find Tron pieces, use it to find Crusher. You know, it's a good card for digging to many of the colorless cards that Tron has. Does regular Tron play it? Am I just crazy? I feel like I'm coming up blank.
I mean, the old Rugtron decks where you played like the stars and the spheres, I
Like
think you had
going to-
enough density. But
It does, yeah. On Goldfish, it doesn't look like the more, the newer Tron lists are really playing it. I've been playing it a lot in the mono green Tron list, which is why I had a moment of confusion there. Which is a fun deck to play around with, but definitely very strong there because you're playing like all the spheres and stars and all that stuff. Which I think that the Dendrovitron, Marasatron lists have kind of that package is not as popular as it used to be.
yeah, those decks are trying to enact a slightly longer game plan. So Stirrings is good as just like, I need to dig to something now. 5 cards is a lot to look at, and this thing, it's good. It's good. How about you take this this next little critter?
Yeah. Next up, we got Aura Gnarlid. A 2 and a green gets you a 2/2. Creatures with power less than Aura Gnarlid's power can't block it, and Aura Gnarlid gets +1/+1 for each aura on the battlefield. So really played in Boggles. Yeah. It's good in Boggles as another threat that doesn't have to actually have the auras on it.
Yeah, and that whole can't be chump blocked ability really makes this thing a huge pain to deal with. It kind of asks that you have non-red removal for it yesterday, and if you don't, it's just really miserable to deal with this thing because the odds when it comes down, most of the time it's big enough that you're just never blocking it. So I don't like this card, Adrian. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not that I think it's bad. I just hate losing to this thing.
Because it dies to removal?
Not because it dies to removal, because it requires removal immediately and can't be chump blocked. I'm a big fan of playing control decks, and I like being able to chump block big threats and buy myself a little bit of time. This thing just goes, all right, do you have a Doomblade or similar? If not, I'm just going to beat your head in with an 8/8.
Salty Mike is salty. You got it.
Just because I don't like a thing doesn't mean that it's actually bad. It's just I have lost a frustrating amount of games to this thing.
That's fair. I'll give you that.
All right. Next up in green, Nest Invader. Nest Invader is a 2-mana 2/2, 1 in a green, and it's an Eldrazi drone. And when it comes into the battlefield, you put a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn creature token onto the battlefield that has sacrificed this creature. Add 1 colorless to your mana pool. So this is still pretty popular in Stompy builds, right?
Yeah, because you can go turn 2 Burning Tree Emissary, Nest Invader, or even just Burning Tree Emissary, Nest Invader. Plus it has built-in Edict protection. It's like, Yeah, it has Edict Protection. You can chain it off of Burning Tree Emissary, and then if you sacrifice the token, you can trigger your own Morbid for Hunger, the Howl Pack. So as a whole, just not like the strongest card, but plays well in the deck.
Yeah, just the fact that this gives you a way to potentially stall like an opposing attacker. Again, as you mentioned, turning on Hunger, the Howl Pack. Just the fact that it soaks up an Edict, it just gives you just enough stuff that's just difficult enough for the decks that would like to prey upon Stompy to deal with. It's a really elegantly designed card because nothing about this is super pushed. It's just good. It's just slightly above curve enough that it works. This thing can also ramp you. Like, let's not forget that Stompy is usually somewhere in the 17 to 18 lands realm. Sometimes you do need to cast those elephant guides. So just having a way to ramp up a little bit is nice. It's a nice little upside. I mean, I guess you could also technically chain these things together for a green apiece. Maybe do like a pseudo Burning Tree Emissary impression.
Stop.
A thought.
Up next, we've got Overgrown Battlement. 1 and a green. Defender. Tap. Add green to your mana pool for each creature with Defender you control. This is part of the Freed from the Real combo deck, isn't it?
It was at one point. Again, Freed from the Real is one of those decks that so rarely shows up that there are a handful of configurations of it.
And is this also not in the Wonder Walls deck?
Oh, the Defender tribal deck?
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly can be. It's the place I have the fondest memories of playing this actually is not even this format. I used to play a decent chunk of Peasant online with people in Europe, and there was a deck that got to play this and Cloudpost and Eldrazi, and it was real fun.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, no, it was basically a limited deck for this format with the inclusion of Cloudpost. So it was silly, but it was fun. So Overgrown Battlement, 1 and a green for an 0/4. It's a wall. It's got Defender, and it taps out a green to your mana pool for each creature with Defender you control. I believe
that's your opinion.
So I've seen this thing get out of hand. The catch is most of the decks where it gets out of hand do powerful nothing with it. Because I've definitely seen like Overgrown Battlement into what is that thing? The Mirage one. The one with the guy lost in the woods. The one with -0, -1 counters.
Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. It's not Wall of Wood.
Wall of Vines.
God, what is that card? It's using it played in Pod too.
Yeah, like I know exactly what this card is. I just cannot for the life of me come up with the name. But
hold on, I'm gonna get it. Why can I not? Wall of Roots. I was like, why can I not remember this?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You could do this, and then like next turn play Wall of Roots, and this thing taps for 2. You can put a counter on Wall of Roots, play a 3-drop. Maybe, I don't know, Axebane Guardian, and then on your next turn you have access to 7 mana out of your walls alone. So it
go crazy.
Yeah, you can go crazy. The catch is you're not going crazy with stuff that's really ending the game. I think the next one we should talk about is Snake Umbra, which is 2 and a green for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. It also has totem armor. And I have definitely seen this played in Boggles as like a one of. I think it's
pretty saucy when you can draw cards.
Yeah. The fact that this is a green Ophidian effect that also kind of protects the thing that it's attached to is neat.
And you still get to do your damage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. I always forget that Ophidian actually didn't deal damage when it drew a card. And
that's bad.
Yeah, it is bad. Do you know that card's actually common?
Yes, I did actually. I was thinking, I knew, but it's just not very good.
It's not very good, but you can play Ophidian in Pauper. That is a thing you can do.
I'm going to skip down quite a bit here. And my next card that I want to talk about is Prophetic Prism. Yes, this is the first set with Prophetic Prism, which is played in Tron, and Boros. Two of what we consider to be pillars in the format. And it just goes into so many decks. Affinity plays it. It can go into like weird random 3-color decks. It's basically, one of the best mana fixers we have in the format.
Yeah,
wow.
The fact that this thing draws a card is really big. Just the fact that you get to fix your mana for 2 mana. So you pay 2 mana into this thing, and you draw a card. So already it's better than cycling abilities on most cards. On top of that, it's going to fix your mana for the rest of the time it stays in play. Tron really needs that as support.
It's going to up your affinity count. It's going to be able to get picked back up later by a bird, ups your metalcraft count. Like it just does so many things. It's I think we used to joke when Mike went here, if you're playing Prophetic Prism on turn 2, you're going to win the game. And it turns out that that's true more often than not.
Yeah, this thing just represents so many little aspects. So many little aspects of this card add up to something that is really, really underwhelming when you first glance at it, but really vital to a lot of decks and how they actually go about enacting their game plan. And I think this is probably one of the better cards in the format in terms of the width of decks that it sees play in, because
it's a workhorse.
Yeah. Like this sees play in Affinity. It sees which is an aggro combo deck. It sees play in the ultimate mid-range deck of the format, Boros Monarch, and it sees play in one of the dirtiest control decks in the format, Tron. Like across all those, this card is still good. It's still really solid, and this is where it came from. Also, gonna have to bother you for another art question here, since this thing's been reprinted a bunch. Where do you fall on the art for Prophetic Prism? Which is your fave?
This one's my favorite. I have 2 in foil from the original printing. I have a Japanese foil from M25, but I own a playset of the Kaladesh foils, which is what I'm currently running in my deck, and I do not like the Gate Crash one. What do you think?
I think I'm there with you. I have 2 playsets of this. One playset is all the Kaladesh ones, and the other one is a split playset of this and the Gate Crash ones. I think the Gate Crash is the weakest.
It's still fine art. I'm just not a big fan of it. I like the rainbow on this one a lot.
The Gate Crash art kind of suffers from the whole reprinted online mocks effect, where
it's the hand and that's about it.
It's a hand holding a rock. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's what this is too. But at least got the face in there.
Well, I think what I'm specifically like, the specific target of my displeasement here is the shot of a disembodied hand in front of a scene from the current plane we're on holding a rock. That's look, the thing I don't like.
So the first one, the flavor text, is okay. It's the explorer who found it got a bad deal when he sold it. He really got rich. But if you go to Gate Crash, the flavor text says, to understand Ravnica, one must first understand how each guild contributes to its stability. By itself, not that meaningful. If you go to Kaladesh, though, it says to understand Kaladesh, one must first understand how Aether and Invention flow together through the Great Aether Cycle. So I do like how they've sort of thematically tied them together in that way.
Well, I mean, it's there in the name. It's a prophetic prism. It gives you a gift of sight.
I just like how the later 2 flavor texts are, very much alike.
Yeah, it is a neat little note. Let's move on to some other neat colorless cards. I'm gonna take Ulamog's Crusher, which is an 8 generic mana 8/8. Already, that is a fine creature in Limited.
Passes the vanilla test.
Yeah, passes the vanilla test, goes in any deck in Limited that hopes to get to 8 mana. This was at Common in its original printing, and here's the thing. 8/8 for 8 is not making waves in our format. What is making waves in our format is the fact that it also has stapled onto it Annihilator 1. And for those unfamiliar, let me tell you about would you argue this is the least fun mechanic in Magic?
The least fun? Annihilator?
It's got to be up there.
I mean, sure. I think Land Destruction might be the least fun.
I'm talking just in terms of like keyworded abilities that were a major part of a set.
Okay, sure. It's frustrating to... I mean, it's very on theme for the Eldrazi, but there's a reason that Emrakul is one of the best finishers in the game, right? Like for decks that are going that route, because Annihilator 6 is just like almost unbeatable. and then getting hit for 15 on top of it. Annihilator 2, not so bad, but if you have to chump block this guy, you're losing 3 permanents basically. So, yeah, it's up there for being unfun. I think losing permanents in general that are not creatures is unfun in Magic. So I agree to a certain extent.
Yeah, and the fact that this thing just kind of, on top of being a very, very quick clock, if you can get this thing established, the fact that it just kind of requires you to answer it, or it's just going to chip away at not just your creatures, but your lands, any enchantments you've got out, any artifacts.
But I do like it from a flavor standpoint. The Eldrazi, Eldritch Horrors.
Yeah, the Eldritch Horrors consuming worlds, and I do really like the fact that this thing has found a handful of homes. It's played in Tron pretty frequently as a finisher.
It's basically. I was sort of joking earlier about the Snapcaster Mage. This is our format's Emrakul, right? Like you expect to resolve one of these. Sure, it doesn't have protection from, spells, and it lacks a bunch of stuff that actually makes Emrakul like super, super, super powerful. But you're looking to close out the game with a huge beater that's also going to make your opponent lose their board.
Yeah, this thing is nutty. And I also love the fact that this is part of our only Reanimator deck in the format, where it can leave your opponent with 0 permanents on turn 2 if you have the absolute nut hand.
I mean, yeah, this card is good.
Yeah. Why don't you take the last card that was new to Pauper in this set that I'm not sure a good chunk of our listeners are aware this is where it started.
It's Evolving Wilds. Yep.
Yeah.
Evolving Wilds is from Rise of the Eldrazi. Sacrifice it, search for a basic land card, put on the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library. This is like one of our only 2 fetch lands. Sure, you can count Terramorphic Expanse, but does anyone actually play 8 fetches in their deck? That's not Ash Barrens in this.
I was gonna say there's decks that play 4 of this and 4 Ash Barrens, but Terramorphic Expanse is definitely, I think, the less played of the fetches, and I have no idea why.
There's only one art.
I guess that's true. There are some very nice arts that have been done for Evolving Wilds over the year. And no offense to Steve Belladine, but I think this is the least interesting of them.
I have the F&M promos. Out of the set ones, I think my favorite is Cons.
Dragons, right? The flowing lava.
Yeah, that one's pretty good.
I'm a big fan of the Arena promo that they just did. The one for I think it was Rivals Arena.
That one's really nice too. There's a bunch of promos. There's also a promo from Dragons as well. That's, not great, but it's a promo.
Oh yeah, that's the non-foil one from the pre-release, right?
Yeah. But I agree with you that this one with the trees is kind of one of the not as exciting ones.
All right, so those are cards from this set, which are still seeing play today or have historical notability. Do you have any cards out of this set that were new in this set that you think deserve a little bit more love, would be really cool to play?
Level up not being a thing is kind of weird. I get that it's slow. I guess that was a mechanic really only destined for limited, but none of the level up cards are good in Pauper. They're just so slow.
They're really slow, and here's the thing. If it doesn't work here when we have stuff like, for example, Champion's Drake, which is 1 and a blue for 1/1 with flying, and it gets +3/+3 as long as you control a creature with 3 or more level counters on it.
In limited, it was a strong strategy. You had Venerable Teacher at common. You had a bunch of good level ups at common. Like white blue level up was a deck in limited.
Yeah, it's so slow, and while most of the ones at common do require colorless, there's just much more powerful things that, for example, Tron could be doing than just sitting around trying to get, for example, with Caravan Escort, trying to get and this is absolutely absurd, a 9-mana 5/5 with First Strike.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's a very neat mechanic, and the card frame is really funky. If you've never seen one before, look them up. They're very, very strange. It's just one of those things that never really clicked. And I think the only one of these, there's what is it? Student of Warfare sees cube play, and so does the Jiraga Tree Speaker and Enclave Cryptologist from time to time. But the ones at common are just, in my opinion, a little underwhelming for what you're paying into them. I want to talk about for a second Dawn Glare Invoker. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's
No.
2 and a white for a 2/1 with flying, and it has an ability for 8 generic mana. Tap all creatures target player controls. I don't know. I think it's neat.
It could maybe do stuff.
Not really. It's just a neat card.
Yeah, it's a neat card.
What else is there in the set? There's a handful of other the Umbras, the auras with totem armor. None of the rest of them are really that powerful. We've got stuff like Eel Umbra, which is 1 and a blue, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 totem armor, but it also has flash, so you can kind of flash it in response to a removal spell, I guess, or flash it in to like deal an extra point of damage out of nowhere. But it's really not that impressive.
This set is old enough that most of the cards on this that we've gone over like are really the ones that get played, and like the set's old enough that I don't know if, barring a huge new card in the format, it's hard to think that some of these are going to actually get played. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I think one of the ones that I've seen people try to make work is Shared Discovery. You familiar?
What does that one do? Tell me.
1 blue for a sorcery. Draw 3 cards. You want to know what the downside is?
Yes.
As an additional cost to cast Shared Discovery, tap and brace yourself here so you don't fall out of your chair. 4 untapped creatures you control.
It's a lot of creatures, Mike. It's a lot of creatures.
I mean, how do you feel about 5 mana Convoke Ancestral?
I mean, it's not even really Ancestral, right? Ancestral's an instant.
Yeah, it's one of those cards where I think people see it and it looks very much like Ancestral on the front, but the moment you actually try to play this thing, like I've seen decks that try to make use of this with like token strategies where it's like, all right, just going to turbo out a bunch of tokens and then...
Well, the problem is with the blue deck, right? Like what token generators are you using? I guess you'd have to be blue-white.
Yeah, you end up being blue-white or even blue-red because you got all the goblin token producers. So, like, people have tried it. I don't think this card is actually good. It just kind of, like, the dream of, I don't know, having 5 mana, casting, like, Goblin, Mog War Marshal, this thing, tapping down all the stuff that just ETB'd is, like, the dream. I don't know. It's not great, if we're being completely honest. But and then a lot of the other stuff in this is as per most sets, it's kind of filler. It's not the sort of thing that really impacts the format in a heavy way. I do want to mention Raid Bombardment. Again, are you familiar with this one? Yes,
and I don't think I feel like I've heard people say they play it, but I've never actually seen it in a deck. Tell the people at home what it does, but I do know what it is.
So it's 2 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less attacks, it deals 1 damage to the defending player. So the idea here is that you can attack, quote, through your opponent's blockers. And I've definitely seen this as something people have played in Goblins because you just go wide.
I think typically you're going to see Impact Trimmers in Pauper, though.
Yeah, that is the thing. Impact Tremors, I believe, is a mana cheaper, and it's on ETB.
Right, so you don't even have to attack. Impact Tremors is also a much newer card. Impact Tremors is from Dragons, so I mean, for a long time, I'm sure people did play Raid Bombardment, but yeah, I think Impact Tremors in this day and age is where you would want to be, where you prefer to be.
Yeah, just a little too low impact, but I think when we first talked about this before we started recording today, Adrian was not completely sold on the concept of this, but Rise has some pretty high quality cards for the time.
I was worried that we were just going to talk about a set where we were like, well, there were a couple cards in this set. We all know which ones were good. And instead it's like, no, this set was deep enough that we really did get to talk about a lot of the cards. So I am okay with that.
I think the big thing about Rise is it was designed as a format to be a format with a lot of build and then a lot of top end and stuff to do along the way. And I think that lent it to kind of having good ramp targets and good early game plays that helped solidify your position. So I think this was one of those ones where the themes for this set kind of naturally shook out to benefit Pauper in a unique way. And they printed some really silly stuff at Common. Like I cannot imagine Ulamog's Crusher being printed as a common these days. And I don't know. This is a set that I did not play through. I've heard that the limited environment is exquisite.
Yeah, I've heard it's very good.
I don't know.
A little before my time though.
I thought we'd try something a little different. This was a suggestion that I saw and immediately was like, yeah, we can make this happen. So definitely thank you, Thraben Valiant, for the suggestion. I think this was real fun, and I'm sure there's other sets that we could do this with, but Rise was definitely the one that sprung to mind immediately, just as, you know, this is a set with a high density of stuff that's pretty pertinent even to this day.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Look at me, wows.
Oh God, not again. All right, Adrian, we've been talking about this set for a while. You wanna take us out of the show?
Sure. Everyone, thanks for listening to us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our patrons, especially Ask Dr. Bear, our patron shout-out for the day. Consider supporting us if you like the show. Check below this video the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you, if you're listening to this on our platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or an idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS, Pat's Games, and Mike's LGS, JP Comics, and of course, L. You can find our theme song Quantitative and other great tracks over at his SoundCloud, which is soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.